Those who know the right questions must reach those asking the wrong ones, and sometimes even the lost. I protect my identity because truth has a body count. Welcome to the Anarchist File. You want to see the most expensive LARP on Earth? It's the uniformed fantasy we call law enforcement. Guys cosplaying as Roman centurions with Ray-Bans and radios, walking around like gods because they memorized some penal codes and got a badge, the state printed wholesale. Civilian power granted to a class of men trained to escalate, record, and repeat, and somehow you're supposed to feel safer when they're near. This isn't security, this is theater. Theater backed by $1 trillion budget, a network of blue-gloved bureaucrats, and a PR pipeline so polished even the worst actors look like heroes. The propaganda machine is the real empire. Daily body cam montages, friendly canine units on TikTok, inspirational community outreach stories nestled between headlines about another no-knock warrant gone wrong. It's not about law, it's about optics, obedience, conditioning. But let's stop pretending this just showed up one day. This was built, slowly, deliberately, with funding, with federal grants, with surplus military gear funneled into small towns that couldn't fix potholes, but can field MRAPs like they Fallujah. You call it public safety, I call it national cosplay. There are over 18,000 law enforcement agencies in the U.S., each one running its own internal ecosystem of paperwork, force, and plausible deniability. And somehow, none of them know how to prosecute their own. Curious, right? You get a parking ticket? You're in the system forever? Officer shoots the wrong guy on a wellness check? Paid leave? And a 30-month internal investigation? Maybe a GoFundMe on the side? The badge doesn't just protect itlanders, it transforms mistakes into procedures. It morphs aggression into protocol. It sanitizes violence into a press release. And if you so much as question it, you're anti-law, you're ungrateful. You don't back the blue. As if reverence is owed just because someone got a job with qualified immunity. Let's talk about that. Immunity. Imagine a job where you can destroy property, violate rights, detain people unlawfully, lie on record, and still not get fired, not even sued. That's not accountability, that's state-sanctioned invincibility. And this is what we're told stands between us and chaos. You know what stands between us and chaos? Is the illusion that force is rare, that surveillance is justified, that the state's violent apparatus only activates when the bad guys act up. You don't question the cameras? You don't ask why your local cops have drones now? You don't complain when they track license plates, scrape social media, geofence protesters? You've been trained not to notice. Surveillance is no longer hidden, it's flaunted. Body cams aren't for your protection, they're for evidence. They're evidence. And you don't control that footage. They do. Do you think the rise of video means accountability? No. It means content. It means the blue bureaucracy gets final cut. And when you complain, when you protest, when you dare suggest that maybe, just maybe, force should come with friction, you're labeled soft. You're told, try living without cops. You're reminded of all the chaos in cities that tried reforms. But nobody mentions the chaos that happens with police, though wrongful convictions, though raids at the wrong address, the peaceful guy in cuffs who never makes it to booking, the petty fines that spiral into arrest warrants, the civil asset forfeiture where they steal your car and call it justice. It's not one bad apple. It's an orchard soaked in incentives that punish restraint and reward escalation. A system designed to police your behavior while immunizing theirs. And they've scaled it beautifully. Because now, you don't even need to be a threat to get flagged. You just need to exist digitally. Because law enforcement isn't just a badge and a gun anymore. It's a server farm. It's predictive algorithms. It's facial recognition run by companies with no oversight. It's heat maps based on zip code and guesswork. It's Amazon Ring partnerships with cops you didn't elect. It has private surveillance baked into every app and quietly offered two departments that don't need warrants to get what they want. This is the new surveillance. It's not coming, it's here, and it's built on the old model. Fear, compliance, spectacle. Except now, the baton's digital. The cell is virtual. The cop doesn't need to knock. They can just ping your phone. Pull your footage, scrape your face, and let the paperwork catch up later. This isn't paranoia. This is infrastructure. And once you see it, you can't unsee it. So in this video, we're going to tear it apart. All of it. The culture, the conditioning, the surveillance dragnet, the blue mythos wrapped in flags and honor. Because the only thing more dangerous than the system is believing it was built to protect you. To understand what we're dealing with, you have to go upstream. You have to look at the DNA. Because police departments didn't just fall from the sky like some divine order. They were constructed intentionally, incrementally by interests who needed bodies, not minds. Enforcers, not thinkers. Agents of order, not justice. The American police model didn't descend from noble night watchmen safeguarding peace. It was engineered on the East Coast, By merchants terrified of dock workers and immigrants? In the South, by plantation owners needing patrols to recapture runaway slaves. That's not edgy history, it's factual. The Charleston City Guard, the Slave Patrol, the first organized police force in Boston. A commercial enforcement arm for the shipping elite. The design was never neutral. It was always about containment. Contain the poor. Contain the black. Contain the foreign. Contain the unruly. And if that sounds harsh, good. Because whitewashing the origin story is how this beast stayed cute for 200 years. It's always been a force multiplier for the status quo, nothing more. It's why when the economy tanks, funding for schools and libraries gets slashed first. But police budgets? Bulletproof. Always grown. Because the state doesn't invest in solutions, it insures against revolt. They don't fear your pain, they fear your reaction to it. Enter the police. Fast forward through the 20th century, and you see it evolve: police departments absorbing military tactics, riot control strategies, surveillance technology, and federal dollars. By the time the war on drugs hit, cops weren't just local enforcers, they were frontline soldiers in a domestic occupation. But no one said it like that, because marketing is everything. We called them heroes. We made movies about their courage. We let sitcoms humanize incompetence. We let nightly news anchor their legitimacy. And every time a city burned, they emerged with more budget, more gear, more reasons to keep growing. And then came 9/11s, the accelerant. Homeland Security dumped billions into local readiness. Translation: armored trucks for school districts, grenade launchers for counties with no airports, training programs by ex-military contractors teaching deputies in Idaho how to breach like Delta Force. Nobody questioned it. Because terrorism, that was the golden phrase, to protect and serve in a post-9/11's world. Suddenly, every city was a battlefield and every citizen a potential threat. You think TSA is just about planes? It's about normalizing search. It's about training you to strip, scan, and comply without question. It's about conditioning. Same goes for local law enforcement. SWAT raids skyrocketed not for hostage situations, but for drug warrants, noise complaints, overdue citations. They started battering down doors with pre-dawn efficiency. Cameras rolling, tanks idling, flashbangs first, questions later. And all of this was called safety. But safety for whom? Because if you look at the data, who gets stopped, who gets searched, who gets arrested, who gets charged, the answer's obvious. It was never about protecting everyone. It was about managing risk. And risk, in the eyes of the state, always looks like the powerless. Poor, risk. Brown, risk. Brown, risk. Unhoused, maximum risk. Rich, VIP lane. The role of the police was never to be your neighborhood's guardian angel. It was to be the selective fire while letting the influential through, locking the rest behind bureaucratic bars and cages built on statutes no one reads. And the cruelty, it's not a bug, it's a feature, a spectacle. 'Cause punishment is public performance. It tells the rest of the herd, don't try it. And in an age where everyone's recording, cops don't de-escalate, they posture, they flex. They go full gladiator because that body cam footage might be Exhibit A, or it might be a recruiting ad. The blue wall isn't just silence, it's optics control, and it works. Ask the average suburban voter how they feel about the cops. They'll say, they're underappreciated. Ask them if they've ever been arrested, pulled over without cause, frisked, cuffed, sat on a curb for an unpaid ticket. They haven't. So the illusion holds. Because their world is policed gently, and they mistake that for fairness. But if you've ever been on the wrong side of the badge, you know. You know how fast things escalate. You know how thin the line is between a conversation and a charge. You know how qualified immunity turns every encounter into a game of legal roulette. And let's talk about that immunity. Qualified immunity means that unless a cop violates your rights in a way that has already been declared unconstitutional in a previous court ruling with near identical facts, they walk. Let me repeat that. Unless someone else, in some other case, was wronged in the exact same way, there's no precedent, no liability, no accountability. Imagine if doctors worked that way. Sorry, we removed the wrong organ. No lawsuit, that's never happened like this before. That's the legal fortress cops operate under, and it extends to prosecutors, to judges, to the entire machinery that ensures that no matter what happens to you, the institution survives. At most, a payout, a settlement, a few million from the city treasury, paid by taxpayers. No one fired, no one indicted. A new press release, a sensitivity training module, a tearful chief at a podium, the cycle refreshes. And we're told, reform is coming. Body cams were reformed. Police unions fought them for a decade, then co-opted the footage and made it theirs. Now they're the editors of their own evidence. Beautiful. Community review boards were reformed, until they got defunct. No subpoena power, no teeth, just theater. Implicit bias training. That's reformed too. A Zoom call with a consultant who explains how not to shoot people in the back because they looked scary. None of it changes the structure. Because structure is the point. Law enforcement was never built to evolve. It was built to endure. Like concrete poured over dissent. You don't change it with better PR. You don't fix it with more rules. You only change it by understanding what it actually is. And what it is power. Not the sexy kind you see in movies. Not the protect the streets kind your uncle posts about on Facebook. Power in its rawest, laziest, most American form. Control without consent, muscle without memory. Force without reflection. And now, that force has a data center. It has satellite imagery, predictive analytics, real-time surveillance, AI filters scanning public feeds for pre-crime behavior, and access to private apps that feed it everything from your doorbell footage to your social graph. And somehow, it's still dressed up like officer-friendly. That's the illusion. Let's talk about the new badge. It doesn't shine, it pings, it scans, it learns. It's not a man in a uniform standing on a street corner. It's a camera mounted on a lamppost, tied to facial recognition software trained on DMV databases and Instagram filters. It's a mesh network of sensors, apps, satellites, databases, and private partners all humming quietly beneath the noise of daily life. The future isn't uniformed. It's passive. It's ambient. It's watching you now. You think surveillance is cameras in obvious places? It's quaint. The real dragnet is decentralized, privatized, and subscription-based. And the cops. They've been upgraded. Not in skill. In access. Start with Ring. Amazon sold you the camera. You installed it. You created the feed. And the second you clicked agree, you built the police, a real-time surveillance node on your porch, for free. They didn't need a warrant. They didn't need approval. They just needed a partnership. And in over 2,000 cities, they got it. Now when something goes down, cops don't canvass, they email. We'd like footage from 7:30 p.m. to 8:15 p.m. on your block. And most people hand it over. Because if you've got nothing to hide, that line, that phrase, the most abused mantra in the surveillance religion, it's always used to justify watching the innocent, never to excuse the corrupt. But that's the thing. The state doesn't have to justify watching anymore. You volunteered. You carry the tracker. You post your location. You run your face through filters. You tag your friends, scan your receipts, talk to Siri, and let apps index your keystrokes. And law enforcement loves it. Because every open source footprint is a free lead. No warrant, no paperwork. Just data. Served fresh. Palantir, Clearview, ShotSpotter, these aren't startups. They're state tools disguised as private firms. They scrape, they parse, they predict. They give local cops access to capabilities that, 20 years ago, would have been considered federal overreach. Now it's just software. Now it's optimization. Predictive policing. It's just a feedback loop with a badge. They feed arrest data into an algorithm, and it tells them where to patrol. Then they arrest more people there. And the algorithm says, see, we were right, crime becomes prophecy, and prophecy becomes policy. But the real trick isn't just prediction, it's scale. Your city doesn't need to hire more cops, it just needs to license more software. Put a few cameras in high traffic areas, tie them to a facial recognition system, and suddenly your downtown has a digital memory longer than any beat cop. Missed a court date 2 years ago? That camera remembers. Get flagged in one county and drive into another. That plate reader logs you? And the data never forgets. You can erase a tattoo, you can burn a file, but digital records, they metastasize. Especially when they're duplicated across agencies, stored on third-party servers, backed up indefinitely. FOIA doesn't touch half of it. Public oversight can't even see it. It's dark data, surveillant but invisible, operative but deniable. You don't need a national ID when your face is already tagged in 5 databases. When your phone ID is mapped to cell tower logs, when your car's VIN gets scanned 12 times between your house and the gas station. And it's not just urban. Rural police departments are plugged in too, through fusion centers, through federal grants, through data sharing networks built after 9/11s that were sold as anti-terror tools and now get used to track protesters and petty theft suspects. Protest is the new crime. You think the First Amendment still exists? Try organizing a demonstration. Watch how fast your cell signals get geofenced. Watch how quickly local cops start monitoring social media for public safety. You tweet a flyer, they scrape the metadata. They know where, when, and who, before you finish making signs. Then comes the drone, the aerial surveillance, the long lens camera that can sit 3,000 feet in the air and watch a city block in real time. No warrant needed. And if you think I'm exaggerating, look up persistent surveillance systems. They tested it in Baltimore for months. Quietly, secretly, it got results. So of course, they shut it down. Why? Because transparency ruins surveillance. The second people know they're being watched, they act differently. They mask, they move, they hesitate. That's bad for prediction. And prediction is the new gold. Cops don't just want to know what happened, they want to know what might happen. Who might do it? Who might be connected? Who might become a problem? Pre-crime isn't science fiction, it's software, and software doesn't get questioned, it gets updated. It's the same playbook every time. 1. Deploy tech for safety. 2. Justify with fear. 3. Obscure the code. 4. Blame the human when it fails. 5. Expand anyway. The result? You get systems that profile based on zip code, flag people based on network analysis, and recommend action based on patterns no one understands but everyone trusts. And all of it comes with a badge. Because the police didn't become more accountable, they became more abstract. Now when they screw up, they say the system failed. Now when you're misidentified, they say we followed protocol. Now when your house gets raided based on bad intel, they say the algorithm flagged it. And there's no one to sue, no one to charge, no one to face. Just the screen, just the silence, just the report. So what do? You live smaller? You post less? You turn off your location? You look over your shoulder? You teach your kids to never speak to cops? Never assume fairness? Never forget that the lens is always on even if you can't see it. You self-regulate, which is the final goal of surveillance. Not control by force, control by habit. You internalize the gaze. You police yourself. You stay safe by being boring, by being unnoticeable, by blending, and they call that freedom. Because in America, freedom doesn't mean they leave you alone. It means they surveil you so thoroughly, you forget what being left alone feels like. So, how do they hold it all together? The hardware is obvious, the software is sneaky, but the glue, the real scaffolding that keeps the whole surveillance theater from collapsing under its own weight is narrative. This machine doesn't just run on tech, it runs on story. Because if you can't see the cage, you don't rattle it. If you think obedience is virtue, you won't question your liege. And if you've been trained since childhood to associate authority with safety, then every camo-clad mall cop becomes your personal bodyguard instead of what they really are. State-sponsored middle management with a weapon and no customer service training. And it starts early, real early. You don't learn about consent in school. You learn about compliance. Raise your hand, ask permission. Follow the bell. Memorize the pledge. Learn the rules, not because they're good, but because they're the rules. Welcome to your first institution, a prep course in soft obedience. From kindergarten on, you're calibrated to interpret uniform as legitimacy. Cops visit your school. That's not just PR, that's recruitment. It's brand building. They hand out stickers, let kids touch the siren, turn community trauma into a photo op. See, the good guys wear vests. Then the stories reinforce it. Hollywood turns beatdowns into drama. Netflix turns wrongful convictions into prestige TV. You grow up watching Law & Order and CSI and every other three-letter acronym franchise pumping out the same gospel. Crime is everywhere, and only the guys with badges can save us. Every episode, a morality play. Cops equals justice. Suspects equals chaos. Surveillance equals progress. And you start to believe it. So when your city installs traffic cameras on every light pole, you don't ask questions. You call it modernization. When the school district buys facial recognition scanners, you say safety first. When they roll out license plate readers, drone patrols, sidewalk microphones, AI threat detection, at the airport you call it necessary. 'Cause you were trained to associate control with comfort. But the truth is uglier. The truth is, none of this stops crime. It just documents it. It escalates it. It predicts it, poorly, and enforces it selectively. But crime reduction? Bleep. Crime went down because lead paint was banned. Because economies evolved. Because culture shifted. Not because some cop in a surplus Humvee patrolled your cul-de-sac with a radar gun. The surveillance state doesn't fight chaos. It fights resistance. You don't get SWAT raided because you're dangerous. You get raided because you're disobedient. You're loud. You're unlicensed. You're decentralized. You live outside the spreadsheet. That's the real threat. And the tools? They're always sold as neutral. Don't worry, facial recognition is just for fugitives. Don't worry, the drones only fly in targeted zones. Don't worry, the metadata doesn't include content. Don't worry, we're just scanning for patterns. And meanwhile, entire neighborhoods get cataloged. Entire generations flagged as high risk. Entire movements infiltrated, discredited, archived. The point isn't to stop action eyes to kill momentum, to burn out dissent before it catches fire. You think you're free to protest? You're allowed to march as long as the route is permitted. The tone is non-threatening, and the surveillance network gets a full 360 of your face and phone and associates. The second you step off the curb disruption, now you're a file. Try to disrupt commerce. You're not an activist. You're a domestic threat. Try to block traffic. You're interfering with critical infrastructure. Try to stop an oil pipeline, stop a foreclosure, stop a police eviction. You're no longer a citizen. You're a subject. And if that doesn't work, they escalate. Not with batons, not always. Sometimes it's quieter, more surgical. They hit your pockets. Civil fines, zoning violations, failure to comply with permit procedures, frozen accounts, IRS audits. Suddenly, Every move you make is uphill. That's luck. Weaponized legality. A slow bleed. They don't jail you. They smother you in process. Because power doesn't need to shoot anymore. It just needs to bore you to death. And if you still manage to resist, if you publish, if you build, if you organize, they smear. Anarchist, radical, conspiracy theorist, extremist, enemy of the state. One algorithmic mislabel and now you're on a watch. No appeal. Just silence at the airport. Flagged wire transfers, glitchy Zoom calls, and a permanent haze around your name. This is the cost of disobedience in a world where surveillance is normalized, where everyone has a file, where every app you install is another key to your personality, where every camera pointed at the street is a one-way mirror backed by a server farm in a precinct with monthly quotas. And somehow you're told, this is just how it is. But that's the lie. This isn't inevitable. This was chosen, budgeted, lobbied, incentivized, institutionalized, and sold to you as safety, because fear is easy to sell and freedom is harder to explain. But freedom isn't a mood, it's a lifestyle cost. It means mess, it means friction. It means accepting risk instead of outsourcing it to a violent machine with badges and blind spots. But we don't want that. We want convenience. We want predictive packages, biometric logins, car insurance that monitors our driving habits for discounts, and surveillance that only ever points at someone else. We want to be observed, but never implicated. We want protection without involvement. But that's not how it works. You feed the machine, and eventually, it eats you. Not because you're guilty, but because you're available. And if you try to opt out, they call you paranoid. But maybe paranoia is just clarity in an age of watchers. You're not paranoid, you're observant. The difference is this. The paranoid imagines ghosts. The observant sees the systems, names them, and refuses to flinch when they call it crazy. You're not crazy. You're lucid. You've peeled back the velvet curtain of Sibbitt's class and seen the machinery, and it's not benevolent. It's not even efficient. It's a ritual, a slow, grinding theater of enforcement, performed by actors too deep in costume to know they were still part of a play, in the surveillance state. That's the stage crew. Invisible, instrumental, untouchable. If you want out, you need to stop believing in actors. You need to stop thinking the next mayor, the next bill, the next sensitivity training will fix this. Reform is the diet pill of empire. It sells the illusion of change without requiring any sacrifice. Don't reimagine policing. Abandon it. Don't audit surveillance. Starve it. Don T back the blue, or abolish the badge until you understand what it actually protects, because it's not you. It's capital, it's institutions, it's the right to extract, control, and punish without being held accountable. So, what do? You start local, but not with voting. You decouple. Don't wait for permission to defend your privacy. Use encryption. Lock your metadata. Stop assuming convenience is neutral. Stop giving your data to platforms that see you as inventory and sell you to institutions that don't even need a subpoena to track your behavior. Build off-grid where you can, digitally and physically. Run mesh networks. Host your own services. Use cash. Cultivate communities that operate outside the state's watchful line, not because you're hiding, but because you're alive, sovereign, and learn to go silent, not permanently, strategically. The loudest dissent is not always the most effective. Sometimes the most radical act is simply not participating. Starve the algorithm. Stop feeding it selfies, hot takes, and location pings. It can index into patterns. Let it misread you. Let it fail. The state thrives on legibility. Surveillance is a clarity weapon. It turns messy humans into datasets, then sells the conclusion back to you as policy. Confuse it. Don't just protest the dragnet. Deny it input. You think that's small? That's the point. Small moves in millions of pockets change the game. But also connect. Not on Twitter, not on Discord, in person. In places without microphones, where people speak without curation, without the paranoia of a screenshot or subpoena. Build trust, build memory, build rituals. Not optimized for clicks, but for survival. You want to beat surveillance? Get boring, get analog, become less efficient, because convenience is a leash. And every time you scan, ping, and tap your way through the day, you pull the collar tighter. Let it go. Watch how quiet life becomes when you're not feeding their machine. And in that silence, build. Not with utopian dreams, with defiant realism. You're not here to win elections. You're here to outlive institutions. You're not waiting for a savior. You're becoming someone ungovernable. And maybe, just maybe, if enough of us move like that, the watchers will realize something terrifying. We stopped watching back, not because we're asleep, but because we don't care anymore. Because their theater is old, their weapons are loud, their software is desperate, and their narratives recycled. We're not afraid of being labeled anymore. We're done being manageable. And that's the real threat. The story isn't over. This was the Anarchist File.